Welcome to the March. Actually, I didn't change that. It's actually the April 13th meeting of the British Empire Study Group. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. You're always welcome here. We're a bunch of philatelists who enjoy all aspects of the British Empire. We have a very liberal definition of the British Empire. Basically anything's fair game because Britain, unless Britain never touched it. So we have a pretty good footprint. So now our next program is a bit of a change from what we originally had in our program, but the next program will be on May 18th. And that is going to be the philatelic forger, Gene Sperati. And it's like, why is being so good so bad? So anyone who knows Sperati knows that some of them were really good. Now the speaker is in change also. We have the honor of having the CEO of the David Feldman International Auctioneers. They are very, for those of you who follow the auction circuit, they've had a lot of Speratis come up. So they've, they're have a very good handle and some great stories. And that's Fernando is going to give that talk. So very honored to have him stay up. So now what I'd like to do for you tonight is show you a little preview of one of the things that that's coming up in July. So bear with me. We'll go ahead and, did everyone hear that?
That Battle of Isandlwana is hugely important. This was a moment when an African kingdom defending itself hit back at the invaders and actually wiped them out. It's a clash of two different warrior traditions. The British invading Zululand and the Zulus defending Zululand. It's just a fascinating, dramatic piece of history. Certainly in modern times, this is the biggest exhibition looking at a single conflict like this. The largest range of physical artifacts connected with the Anglo-Zulu War, engaging with both perspectives, the British and the Zulu perspective.
Okay. So is that a teaser or what? So now the man behind the video is here to say a few words. Do you want Alexander to be formal or just Alex?
No, Alex is perfect. Yes, can you hear me, Joan?
I could hear you fine.
Perfect. Well, I thank you, Joan, and also to Jamie for allowing me to have this very brief sort of teaser at the start of today's program. Yes, Clash of Empires, the 1879 Anglo-Zulu War, will be on as a live exhibition, museum exhibition, hosted at the Royal Philatelic Society in London for the entire month of July. So if you are especially listening to this right now and you live in the UK, I invite you to come. It's open July 1 through 31 every day except Sundays through the entire month of July. It's free admission to the public. It is the largest range of postal and non-postal artifacts related to the Anglo-Zulu War from the time of King Shaka in the 1820s all the way to the present day, and looks at the main war from all perspectives, but using postal artifacts side by side with 5-foot-tall Zulu shields and uniforms and every range of artifact you can imagine. This is an 8-year-long journey for me and the group of folks that have been working on this, and we are very excited. And the slides just a moment ago showed 2 different dates in July, and you'll be hearing more about this, but we're going to do a live from the exhibition. For those that cannot come, we'll be doing a live from the exhibition presentation and sort of showing you these artifacts all in one place while it's on this July. So once again, Joan, thank you for the idea of bringing this exhibition to the study group here, to the Zoom presentations. And again, Jamie, thank you so very much for allowing this a little preview before your presentation today.
Well, thank you, Alex. And yeah, July should be really fun. We have a lot of good things on there, and the dates are on our website if you need it. And I'm getting sunned out here. So let me turn it over to Rob so I could get out of the sun a little bit. Rob, could you please introduce our guest tonight?
Thanks a lot, Joan. Welcome, everybody. Our presenters this evening are Jamie Smith and Adél Bulpitt. Jamie Smith was born in Warwickshire in January of 1935. He lived in Stratford-upon-Avon for 17 years. This is where he began collecting stamps. He left school at the age of 14 and started training to be a chef 4 days after his 15th birthday. He joined the Royal Air Force at the age of 17 as a chef, and he left the service after serving 13 years. In 1966, he moved as a family to South Africa, eventually settling in Vereeniging for the next 40 years. While in South Africa, he was an active member of the Pretoria, Johannesburg, Vereeniging, and Wanderers Philatelic Societies. At the same time, Jamie held UK memberships in the British East Africa Study Circle, the Chinese Society of London, and the Royal Philatelic Society of Great Britain. In 2006, Jamie returned to Stockport in the UK, soon becoming a member of several local philatelic groups. However, the only society he currently belongs to is Poynton, where he serves as secretary. Jamie retired at the age of 83, and over time, he lost about 75% of his hearing. Consequently, he's had to pre-record his Zoom presentations. Adél Bulpitt, a close friend and philatelic associate, has greatly assisted Jamie technically in the project, as well as assisting with the actual Zoom presentations. With newfound time on his hands, the question became, what do I do with the next 88 years? The answer became a project to digitally produce philatelic presentations from his many collections. What started out as 20 presentations has grown close to 90. Jamie's wish is to create philatelic programs that can be shared globally using digital tools such as Zoom. He wants very much to encourage new blood into our wonderful hobby. He also believes that the hobby must go digital to capture the interest of the youth market. He feels old school philatelic books and stuffy meetings probably won't even be on their radar. Adél Bulpitt lives in Pretoria, South Africa, and is currently the president of the Pretoria Philatelic Society. She's also the newest member of the editorial board of the Pretoria Philatelic Society national magazine, the South African Philatelist. She's been working closely with Jamie for the past 3 years, working hard at digitizing his entire collection. Adél is very active on Zoom with several different societies and fully embraces modern technologies in the philatelic field. So without further ado, let's begin our presentation this evening.
I take it that's over to me then, Rob. Just first of all, just to say thank you for all those concerned for having me, and I will get straight on with it and see if we can get it up. Okay, here we go. This presentation is on the British military in West Africa. It concentrates mainly from 1900 with the formation of the West African Frontier Force. It attempts to show the British services in West Africa. It mainly concentrates on the Second World War, showing the areas that the West African Frontier Force served in. Then it carries on to the post-war period until the 4 colonies became independent in the 1950s and the 1960s. Internet map of British West Africa. They include the colonies of Gambia, Sierra Leone, the Gold Coast, and Nigeria. A 6-penny rated cover from Dublin, Ireland, posted on the 9th of February 1863. It is addressed to Dr. J.A. Burke, who was the surgeon aboard the HMS Yaga. The name Yaga is French for waxwing, a bird, and the ship was a French prize which was captured in Indian waters. It was later to be lost with all hands. At the time of posting, the ship was involved on the West African coast as an anti-slaver. The cover is obviously sent by the surgeon's gran, because there is a little note in manuscript under the K on the right of the cover which says "Dear Old Gran." Tatty cover, but the miracle is that the cover has survived. It is from the second expedition against the Ashanti in 1895. That expedition was led by Sir Francis Scott. The cover is cancelled in Cape Coast, but it was posted up country during the expedition, is only 19 days before Kumasi was occupied. It was addressed into Cambridge Hospital in Aldershot, and it is endorsed, no stamps available. A T cachet has been applied in the United Kingdom. I think it is at Aldershot, and two and a half at twopence halfpenny has been charged. The British were established in the area from 1871 after buying out the Dutch, but they had been involved in the slave trade from at least the late 1700s. The Ashanti lived in the north of the area, and they controlled the area, and it is assumed it was from the Ashanti that the British and other traders bought most of the slaves. With the British being there and trying to stop the slave trade, there was trouble with the Ashanti, and two main expeditions were sent against them. The first in 1873 under Major General Sir Garnet Wolseley. That was in, as I say, 1873. The Ashanti didn't abide by the agreement, so a second expedition was sent out under Sir Francis Scott in 1895, and the Ashanti finally came under British administration when the whole area was taken over on the 1st of January 1902. The British interest in West Africa developed from the slave trade, and then the suppressing of the slave trade. We saw on the previous cover the British effort to stop the trading. They did land forces to fight the Africans who supplied the slaves, and gradually settled down into 4 colonies, being Gambia, Sierra Leone, Gold Coast, and Nigeria. In 1900, the British developed the West African Frontier Force, and that comprised of regiment from each of the 4 countries of West Africa. Early postcard of the governor of Gambia inspecting the Guard of Honor of the West African Frontier Force. On the right there, I show a magazine cutting of the Regimental Sergeant Major Alufo Grunchi, who I'm afraid I don't know which regiment he came from. One penny rated soldier's letter bearing the emblem of the West African Frontier Force for Sierra Leone on the flap of the cover is addressed from Freetown into England. A Christmas card with no year given, bearing the emblem of the West African Frontier Force, and this is from Accra in the Gold Coast. Up on the top right there, I show a cigarette card showing one of the Askaris from the Gold Coast Regiment, and on the left you can see this is the Nigerian regiment badge, but it is the same badge for all of the West African Frontier Force, and you can see that this is the palm tree as shown on the inside of the Christmas card. It's an early postcard of the West African Frontier Force, the Nigeria Regiment, shown here on parade in Lokoja in northern Nigeria, and on the right a cigarette card depicting a soldier of the Nigerian Regiment in ceremonial uniform. Early photograph on a postcard of the band of the Sierra Leone Regiment of the West African Frontier Force, and over on the right a more modern ceremonial uniform of the drum major. (1931), a Christmas card from the Nigerian Regiment of the West African Frontier Force with a photograph on the inside of the light battery of the Nigerian artillery at Zaria in Nigeria. Regimental Sergeant Major of the Nigerian Regiment with a cigarette silk on the Nigeria flag on the left and the postcard on the right. Typical British smut humour from the 1950s. 1 penny British Forces concession rate sent from Freetown, Sierra Leone, using the 1 penny postal stationery envelope with King George V on it. The cover has been taxed, but when the cachet on the reverse from the detachment of the Army Ordnance Corps has been seen, the T strike has been cancelled. It is addressed into Saffron Walden in Essex, England. Before World War II, the Royal West African Frontier Force had comprised of 5 infantry battalions. At the beginning of the war, this was increased to several dozen battalions with mainly British officers, but with the shortage of officers and the increase in battalions, more officers were posted in. officers from Southern Rhodesia and South Africa, and later, because there was still a shortfall, 200 Polish officers were drafted in. These regiments were to serve not only in West Africa, but in the Italian campaign in East Africa. They served in North Africa, mainly in Tunisia, and then they were posted to Ceylon, India, to fight in Burma. In West Africa, the Royal Air Force increased their numbers, actually for defense, because the Vichy French was now in control of Senegal, which completely surrounded Gambia. The Air Force were needed to cover the shipping convoys, and aircraft were being shipped in and flown via the Sudan into the North Africa campaign. The Royal Navy were very much involved, especially in Sierra Leone, with the convoys and protecting the convoys. Tupney Halfpenny rated cover from the United Kingdom, censored the PC-90 opened by Examiner. The two O's in the number were the letters given to the Gold Coast for censorship. It was addressed to Mr. Bullwinkle, Esquire, the ADC, that's the aide-de-camp. He was the secretary at Christiansborg Castle to the governor being Sir Alan Burns, and he, being the British representative, would be the head of the military in that area. Press release photograph from Sierra Leone showing the hierarchy, the Air Vice Marshal and the Lord Swinton, the Minister resident in West Africa. A gunner DS Abbey of the 2nd West African Light Battery, that's the artillery. A officer of the Royal West African Frontier Force, and then two postcards depicting members of the Gold Coast and Nigerian regiments. A photograph of members of the Gambia Regiment on a course at Almina Castle in the Gold Coast. The elephant and palm tree emblem in the centre there, 1945. That day depicts the Gambian Regiment. This is a card for the gathering of funds for the British from the Belgian Congo. Now, if we look at the emblem, it is clear that it is the emblem of the Royal West African Frontier Forces depicted on the cigarette card on the right. This is 1941 fundraising in the Belgian Congo for the Royal West African Frontier Force. One and threepence per half ounce airmail from Bulawayo, Southern Rhodesia, addressed into the 3rd Battalion, Royal West African Frontier Force at Zara. The addressee is a sergeant. Now, was not just white officers who were posted in, it was non-commissioned officers, in this case a sergeant, and the white percentage in the force was just over 14%. Thank you card from a battery sergeant major in Gambia is sending the card to a cigarette donor in Allentown, United States of America. He is seconded to the Royal West African Frontier Force. Photographs taken of what is referred to as Esso Camp, Gambia, May 1943. That is written on the back of the second photograph. Tuppence halfpenny concession rate on a censored cover from Bathurst in Gambia to Welling in Kent, England. The British Army put extra military personnel into Gambia because of the French joining or becoming allied to the Germans, and Senegal, which surrounded Gambia, was controlled by Vichy France, and as such a threat. £1 per half ounce airmail on a censored cover from FPO 109, which was in Gambia, and it is addressed into Glasgow, Scotland. Threepence on a censored cover from Bo, the 2nd largest town in Sierra Leone, and addressed into Macclesfield, Derbyshire, England. £1 per half ounce airmail from Cape Town to a corporal serving at RAF station Apapa in Lagos, West Africa. That's Nigeria. It is forwarded to Oshodi TC, which is a transit camp, or was a transit camp. It later became Royal Air Force Oshodi. There is no guaranteeing that this is to a South African. Many British people obviously had relatives in South Africa. Troop ships passing through the South African ports were met by South Africans who took the soldiers and the airmen from the ships, the sailors as well, and entertained them for the day. And also there were the British Empire flying scheme, the training scheme for pilots, air gunners, etc. There were many friendly relationships between the British and South Africans. This is a 6-penny air letter from Derby in England, addressed into a squadron leader with the Royal Air Force with 298 Wing Headquarters, West African Forces. Now, 298 Squadron was a British squadron that were training with Halifaxes to tow gliders for the Normandy landings, and I can find no reference to them being in West Africa, but it is more than probable that they were training with the towing of especially the horses, gliders, in preparation for the D-Day landings. They were also parachuting jeeps in, which they carried underneath the aircraft and then dropped them. Sixpence on a registered cover from Dabankulu in South Africa. That is twopence British Empire surface rate plus fourpence registration fee. It's addressed into the 176 MU, that's maintenance unit, with the Royal Air Force in Freetown with the West African Forces. Second cover from the same correspondence, sixpence on a registered cover to the maintenance unit of the Royal Air Force in Freetown, that is Sierra Leone, and it is from Port Elizabeth. The mail has gone to Durban by the civil post, where it's been transferred to the military post office in Durban also, and then it has gone into the military post to the field post office. Has been received in Takoradi in the Gold Coast before being forwarded to Freetown. Non-active service, postage-free cover from Lagos, cancelled with a Lagos mill cancellation, which is thought to be mill for military. It is from a B Cross, a nurse with the Queen Alexandra's Imperial Military Nursing Service. The name and initials are on the reverse, with a letter or letters afterwards, after the stroke. The letters are thought to be LC, which is for Lieutenant Colonel, being the rank of a principal matron in the service. I was looking to find a group of photographs taken by a serviceman in West Africa, 1943, 1944, and they give a little bit of the background to the time period in West Africa. A soldier of the West African Frontier Force, no indication of which regiment he was from, but his name is on the back of the photograph, Anson Abasi, in July 1944. Photographs of the motor transport with the Royal West African Frontier Force. These photographs are taken crossing the River Volta in the Gold Coast during May 1944. On active service, postage-free, censored cover from Forces Post Office 632 in June 1943. This was in Tunisia. The West African Frontier Force served overseas, and it is believed that the Nigerians, as a Nigerian regiment, moved into Togo, came under the Free French, and accompanied General Leclerc on the trek from Fort Lamy across the desert into the underbelly of Tunisia to fight the remnants of the German and Italian armies after they'd been forced back by Montgomery. $1.30 per half ounce on an airmail cover to Scotland from Kampala in Uganda. It has been sent by Captain William Searle of the 3rd Nigerian Field Ambulance, care of the Army Postal Service, that's the East African Postal Service in Nairobi, and in manuscript at the bottom there, he is on leave there. This would be 1 month prior to moving up with the South African forces into either Ethiopia or Italian Somaliland with the advancing troops. On active service, naval censored postage-free cover from Mombasa addressed to the Royal West African Frontier Forces in Kenya, and then redirected to the 3rd Battalion, the Northern Rhodesian Regiment. It has a very faint cachet, postal frank, naval officer in charge, Kilindini. This is the only time I have ever seen this cachet. It has 2 APS cancellations. Well, cancellations. One is a cancellation and one is transit. The dates are the 11th of September 1940 and the 19th, which would be the receiving strike forwarding in Nairobi. That's dated the 19th of September 1940. This is £1.70 on a cover from Isiolo, which is the gateway into the Northern Frontier District of Kenya, where all the troops were gathering. That's all the Allied troops, mainly the South Africans, backed up by the Gold Coasters, the Nigerians, and the local East African forces. They were gathering there for the invasion of Italian East Africa. The person who sent it is an officer with the Cold Ghost Regiment of the West African Frontier Force. His name is Strother Stewart, and he happens to be the son of the acting Chief Justice of the Gold Coast. And this is him writing home to his mother in Accra in the Gold Coast. When I looked in the cover, there was his father's visiting card. Censored on active service postage-free cover dated the 6th of January 1941. The cover is from the Gold Coast Regiment of the West African Frontier Force, and it was posted in the Northern Frontier District of Kenya, somewhere east of Lake Rudolph up against the Ethiopian border. This is the same month, about 3 weeks after this was posted, that the British forces under Lieutenant General George Brink invaded Ethiopia at the end of January 1941. $170 on an active airmail registered cover from Malindi on the coast in eastern Kenya, addressed via cartoon to Abuti Meta in Lagos, Nigeria. It has been franked with the OHMS military frank, but that would have not been valid for the airmail to Nigeria. It is from the Royal West African Frontier Force, who were stationed in Malindi prior to the advance into Italian Somaliland in January 1941. They had been stationed there because of a suspected invasion by the Italians, because Malindi had been bombed by the Italians in October 1940, 2 months before this cover was posted. $130 on a registered cover from Kenya, addressed into Accra in the Gold Coast, West Africa. It is addressed into a Captain J.L. Gifford, being the same surname as the commanding officer, General Gifford, of the Royal West African Frontier Force. It has been deemed short, and it has been taxed on arrival in the Gold Coast, and 10p in postage due stamps have been applied. East African APO 58 on a cover dated the 25th of March 1941. At this time it was being used at Mega in southern Ethiopia. It was with the South African forces and the Gold Coast Regiment, who this is from, were serving alongside of the South Africans. The cover is on active service, postage free, censored by the East African censor, and is addressed back into Elmina Castle in the Gold Coast. $4 on a air letter from India addressed into Oxford, England. The air letter has been cancelled by the Indian Post Office and censored by a unit censor B371, with the India removed from the bottom half of the cachet. Inside the letter, the address given is the 4th First Light Anti-Aircraft stroke anti-tank regiment of the West African Royal Artillery. This was a newly formed regiment, and they were to serve with the 26th Infantry Division in the Arakan in Burma. A double censored cover, the Indian 178 census cache, and then the Unit X452 British census cache was originally Indian, and it had Indian at the bottom, but orders were given to cut the India out. The X on the cache indicates that it is East African. So we have EAAPO 60, which was at Kuranagula in Ceylon. The unit census mark, as I said, with the X prefix to the number, East African. It's addressed into the Belgium Congo. There is Aruma and Elizabethville caches, and it's from a Captain Glennie of the RASC. Now, he was probably attached to one of the West African Frontier Force. It could have been the regiment of the Gold Coast or the regiment of Nigeria. Double censored cover from Lomé in Togo. The censor is being done on the right of the cover by the Free French, and on the left by the Open by Examiner label with 0032, 00 being the code letters given to the Gold Coast. So this is addressed into a sergeant of the MTSD, that's a Motor Transport Special Duties, and the 302nd WABOD, that is the West African Base Ordnance Depot of the WAADC. Now, I think that means the West African Ammunition Dump Compound of the West African Force. The Free French and the West African forces worked together on at least two stations, Lomé in Togo and Fort Lame. I don't know what they were doing at Lomé, but at Fort Lame, that was the transit station for aircraft flying from West Africa via Togo to Khartoum and then north to the North African battlefields. It was also used as the leaving point when the Gold Coast Regiment travelled to Tunisia with General Leclerc of the Free French when they drove over the desert to attack the underbelly of the German and Italian army when they were retreating from Montgomery. A poor photograph of British troops in Lomé in Togo. This is in May 1944. This is the only reference I have ever found for British troops being in Lomé. This is a civilian cover from Freetown in Sierra Leone, addressed into Brighton, England, and it has been censored with the censor putting the open by censors label on the left hand side and the civil censors cachet passed by censor number 2 in Freetown. However, on the reverse there is the cachet of the Sierra Leone Coaling Company in Freetown. Now the coaling company would have been recoaling ships passing by and ships that needed it in convoys. There was a coaling ship that took coal out to the ships, and this would have been part of the naval services for the passing convoys. Thrupney rated cover, censored with the tombstone, censor's cachet, received from His Majesty's ships. That would have been applied somewhere in the United Kingdom, where it is addressed to Rickmansworth in Hertfordshire. Fivepence on a registered cover from Takoradi in the Gold Coast, addressed into Hashimoto, also in the Gold Coast. It is from the Ministry of War Transport in Takoradi, and it is addressed into the resident minister's office in Hashimoto. That's Bayakura, the capital. The cachet on the front would indicate that it is a Royal Navy element, and we have the cachet on the reverse, Ministry of War Transport, Takoradi, Gold Coast. The Ministry of War Transport was a British government department which was formed in May 1941 to control transportation policy and resources, hence the Royal Navy being involved. It was formed by merging the Ministry of Shipping and the Ministry of Transport. This gave the responsibility of shipping and land transport to a single department, which made things a lot easier. British Forces concession rate on a Forces mail cover from the garrison camp in Freetown, addressed into London. A normal airmail letter, official letter from the garrison in Freetown, and it's addressed to the Admiralty offices in Bath, Somerset, England. Incoming cover from Great Britain to the education wing at Gifford Camp in Accra. On the right hand side there I show a player's cigarette card depicting a West African Frontier Force, Gold Coast Askari. This is the second incoming cover with the sixpenny rate, which was a Forces concession rate from families to their loved ones who had been posted overseas. You can see that this one is addressed to a Colonel Hepper, with the headquarters of the West African Command in Accra. Tuppence Halfpenny Forces airmail raid from a member of the British forces serving at the Gifford camp in Accra in the Gold Coast, and it is addressed into Harrogate in Yorkshire. This is a cover from an official cover from the Gold Coast Military Forces headquarters in Accra, and it is addressed to the Services Welfare Home Department of the Women's Volunteer Service headquarters in London. It is not entitled to the forces concession rate. There is a diamond there which is applied once a year by the post office officials when they're doing their census. This is a threepenny British registered letter which has had to be operated with the penny stamp at the bottom right to make it 4p to meet the new registration fee which was introduced on the 1st of May 1949. The other tuppence halfpenny is to pay the forces concession rate back to the United Kingdom. It has been cancelled in Tokoradi in 1953, and it is from a staff sergeant with the Royal Engineers at the Garrison Engineering Wing in Tokoradi. Tuppenny Halfpenny rated cover to United States of America with the annotation there, Forces Airmail. Forces Airmail was restricted to the country of domicile. So unless this was an American serving with the British forces, it is incorrect and should have been taxed. I have no idea what the COL is, or it could be OOL, and it is from Signals Lance Corporal with the 4th Nigerian Regiment in Nigeria. The other point is that it is addressed to a diamond company, and Kaduna was in the center of the diamond mining business. Were British troops individually involved in diamond mining? This is not the only cover I've seen similar to this, but we'll come to that one again in a moment. This cover is also annotated as a Forces Airmail and is correct. It is 2.5p and it is addressed to a British service, or from a British serviceman back home into Leicester, except that the concession rate again was for personal reasons to the family domicile in the United Kingdom. This is a commercial cover. Unless it's addressed to a member of the family, but the names aren't the same, the sender and the receiver, and it is addressed to a diamond mill in Leicester, England. This is further evidence that individual British troops were involved in some form or other with illicit diamonds. That's all I can think. Tuppence halfpenny on a Forces airmail. Concession rate, question mark, because it is addressed to the Faith Tabernacle in Philadelphia, United States of America. To me, it screams that it should have been taxed, but the post office has allowed it through. Now, for a cover to be taxed, it has to be recorded as needing tax by the country or the authority that is sending it. The responsibility for collecting tax does not stand with the receiving country. So once it is in America, it is just delivered in the normal way. And it would appear that the fault for allowing Forces mail is with the Nigerian post office. At last, a correct usage of the Forces airmail, 2.5 pence, tuppence halfpenny to family. Now, if we can see, the sender is a Sergeant Manson with the pay office in Lagos, member of the British Army who's been seconded back to his family, W.J. Branson, in Woodford Green in Essex. This is a cover from Gifford Camp. It's come back through the civil post office at the Forces concession rate. It has come from the Army workshop at Remy, that's the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers at Gifford Camp. Interesting that the camp has kept the old British name into independence, and that is at Accra. Now, normally we will see two types of mail coming back from newly independent countries. Sometimes the agreement is made with that country to use their mail system at a concession rate, as in this case, and sometimes a British Forces post office is established which will use British stamps, and that is also by agreement with that country. This is why we get stamps of the country or Great Britain stamps. Airmail cover sent through the civil mails. This is 1 threepence per half ounce airmail to the United Kingdom. It comes from a Royal Air Force detachment who are serving in Lagos in Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, the end.
Well, thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation, Jamie and Adél. We'll be turning people over as panelists here as we move along. And I have a couple questions here for you, Jamie.
Let me come off the... Am I taking it off now? I'm on screen
I
now.
got you, Jamie.
Yep,
Thanks. Sorry, Rob. What was the
no.
questions?
Yeah, we've got some questions, Jamie.
Before we have any questions, let me just apologise to Stockport Philatelic Society. I am also a member there as well.
Okay.
I see my boss there was moaning that I left Stockport out. Anyway, Rob, the questions?
Yeah, several of the covers have passed by censor markings. Who actually did the reading of those letters? Was it like a trained post office clerk or military personnel?
I think it was officers of that regiment.
Okay.
they would be the normal ones to sense. That would be part of their duties. Perhaps the duty officer, when he's in the night, when he's got nothing to do, is doing the censoring. I'm guessing, but I would imagine that that's what happened.
Okay. For the inter-Africa correspondence, were these sent via military aircraft, or was there a commercial air service available at that time?
There was transport from East Africa. Well, let's go on to the others first. Mail from North Africa would come in via Khartoum and be flown back by the military to come back down to Khartoum and then across to West Africa. So that would be the one way. Mail coming from Burma would probably come by ship, I would imagine, into Mombasa and then passed on through the military again via Khartoum. Those would be the routes coming in. See, when they were fighting in East Africa, that would come down with the military and just automatically go through with the military mail to West Africa via Khartoum, by the Sudan. See?
Somebody's asking, what country in West Africa had the most mail?
Had the most mail? Oh, I would imagine Nigeria. But to say that's a fact, I'm not sure. But it makes sense to say Nigeria.
And last question I have here, do all registered covers have a hand-drawn cross? How come we sometimes see only one line on a cover? Where it's divided into 4 parts?
I think that registered mail should have a cross. The one line normally represents express mail or a special service, as opposed to the registered mail. Registered mail should have the cross in blue.
Okay. What happened to the frontier fighters? Was that disbanded, or is there still something left of them?
What normally happened with these colonial regiments, once they became independent, that regiment would become the Nigerian, presumably rifles, the Ghanaian rifles, each would keep their own. That's what happened in East Africa as well.
Okay. All right, Jamie, those were all of the questions that we had posted here. Joan, do we have anybody turned over now with questions?
Well, I have a hand up, and the question is about the mixed franking that we saw on some of those covers with cents and shillings. What was going on with that?
Yeah.
Now you've got me worried. Which ones?
Well, they were Kenya and Uganda stamps. The Ugandans were in cents and the Kenyans were in shillings.
Yeah, well, that's cents of a shilling. East African currency was shillings. There were no pounds, just shillings, and that was divided into 100 cents.
So 1 shilling was 100 cents.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 50 cents was the equivalent of 6pence.
Okay, there was one cover there that had 3 50-cent stamps and something in shillings. I don't remember what. And then the sum.
Yeah, that is East African currency.
Yeah, the sum of them all made me assume that 50 cents was 1 shilling, because 2 of those 50-cent stamps would be a shilling, and then the other part would be 6.
That's right. Yeah.
Hey, is there anybody else with their hand up?
Letting me off light, aren't they?
I think you filled it all in. Richard Noonan.
We have video now. Oh, you have to be off.
Richard, are you there?
Richard needs to unmute.
Yeah, and I don't know how to do that.
We've got you now, Richard.
You were unmuted for a second.
Oh,
You got me now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have you now.
One area that interests me and I didn't see covered at all is the, I believe it was the post-World War II Cameroons, the Nigerian group that went in there when they split up part of the colony between the British and the French.
yeah, I know what you're talking. The British went in as well, eh?
Yeah.
But I haven't covered that. Well, I have covered it, but not in this presentation.
Oh, you've seen material though.
I've got some. I've got material of the British being in there, but not the Nigerians being in there.
Okay, thank you.
Tony Ward, have you got a question?
Yes. Look, thank you very much. It is fascinating to be able to see how you can possibly interpret all of these hieroglyphs that appear with all of the symbols and the letter combinations which refer to whichever battalion, group or regiment, and it must be very satisfying for you to be able to figure out what or who the letters were. It must be so pleasing for you.
Well, I just have to thank Google for that. Admittedly, I got a basic knowledge, but if I'm not sure, I've got individuals all over who are interested in different areas. I just send them an email.
It is fascinating to see the amount of information you can get from really just a few letters which are occurring, plus all the relevant stamps, and it is fascinating the story that you can make from covers. It is really good. Congratulations.
So I think it's so important to put your material into stories. We need the youngsters in, and the youngsters will only look at something that is eye candy on their cell phones. And doing what I do, I think, interests them. And I'm like a fisherman trying to get the youngsters into philately via different areas on the computer and through the clubs.
You've done very well. You've done very.
Thanks,
What I
Tony.
really liked about what Jamie did was it showed that if you have a story to tell and you're like, I can't speak for an hour, you can do it a different way, and it's still fantastic. So Jamie, I think you're just a pioneer in this area.
Thanks. The thing is, so many of us have got collections, and when we go, what happens to them? They get broken up. Where's all that knowledge that a person had if it doesn't get made into a presentation? It's all very well having a catalogue when it was sold off, but it's so much nicer if in 50 years, 100 years time, somebody can see what I have put together and what other people, it's not just me that does it, other people do it. And that goes into the future. The future philatelists at this stage of their life, they're not looking at expensive books and specialized books. They're looking at eye candy. And eye candy is me in this case, presenting a story and trying to hook them. They can watch my stuff going to on the train to work, or sat in the back seat of a car. You can't take a heavy tome, which they're not interested in anyway. But you can just look at your cell phone and see what I produce.
Jamie, it's Robert Toombs here. I came in late. My
Hi, Bob.
apologies. I just got your last two covers, one from Ghana, West Africa, and I'll send you a copy of Ghana, West Africa with the same stamp you had, 3-pence green. And the Canadians used their own local post to get their military mails home. And they followed on from Britain, I think, in Ghana. The British left and the Canadians came in. And I'll send you some stuff on that. I'll email it to you.
How did the Canadians go into Ghana afterwards? What were they doing there then?
Well, from my limited understanding, I'll need some background from you, is they went in to replace the British, but maybe not.
What years are we talking about?
1965, roughly.
That's about the time we're coming out. I can't say that I know anything about that, be honest with you.
Okay, I have some covers from Canadians, and one of them was in our stamp club. He's a retired lieutenant colonel, and I'll send you some of the mails by email to share as a share.
Okay, thanks, eh?
Yep, thanks a lot. And I apologize. I wanted to see your talk, Jamie, but I only got in for the last 2 minutes. I was held up by something.
You're in luck.
Adél will send you something.
Yeah, and you're in luck. It's been recorded. So in a few days, because it takes a while to process it, so give it till like Tuesday, it will be on YouTube. And it's free for everyone in the world to watch whenever they like, just in keeping with Jamie's principles here. So I'm sorry. And David, we have you. And then I'd like Adél to say something, because she did, we missed her in the intro. But David?
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you, Jamie. I applaud your efforts to encourage the youth. We definitely need to philately to continue. I just had a point on one cover you show, which was to George Odham in Leicester, Oby, Leicester, and it was addressed to George.
That's the one with the diamond.
Yes. Now,
yeah.
I've not seen. I've seen lots of mail going to George Odham, but not with diamond mentioned before. And David Horry, who sadly passed away late last year, I think it was, or early this year, he suspected that correspondence to George Odham was a sort of undercover mail and had something to do with espionage, British espionage, but whether that's true or not, I don't know.
I don't know. We've got Daniel and David want to come in, if we can let them in.
Hello? Hello?
Daniel.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Jamie, thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. Greetings from Montgomery, New York, in the Hudson Valley. Now, how did this American get involved with the British Empire group? My son did for Father's Day a couple of years ago, got me the DNA test. I'm 68% British, so maybe that partially qualifies me. But I was thinking today of stamps that I have, and I don't think my son is very interested. And I only have the one son, no daughters. So what's going to come of this? I stopped collecting stamps when they started doing the peel and stick stamps, and like the old glue on back stamps, and much more colorful. But my question to you, that was all a big aside. My question to you is, are there any fledgling philately groups within these countries? There's a Nigerian priest comes to work at our Catholic church, which is across the street from where I live. regularly, as does the Archbishop of the area in northeastern Nigeria. Are there any fledgling groups there that would be interested in these, stamp and collections, since it really is their history?
I honestly don't know. I only ever met, well, I didn't meet him. I met his wife. President Kenyatta's vice president was a big collector in his time. That was Marumbi. And he's the only African of all those countries that I ever had anything or saw anything that they'd collected. We had a couple in the Pretoria Society many years ago who were interested, but the countries as such, I think they're trying to get rid of the memories of colonialism, not carry them on. It's sad, actually, because it is their history.
Right, right.
Can I just comment, on the West African Study Circle, it has 11 members currently who are Nigerians, resident in Nigeria. And there is quite a movement going on in Nigeria to stimulate philatelic activity. Quite a few stamp clubs in schools and stamp clubs being set up around the country.
Well, you mentioned in the schools, that's another thing. I think they should take philately into the schools, because I think it is a wonderful tool for education. But that's another one of my, hobbies.
Yep. Jamie, have a talk with me later on the Zoom in Canada, and I can talk to you about schools.
Okay.
Jerry also had a question. Jerry, you've been waiting a while.
Jerry, that's you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You know what? That was a funny thing, just inside, as I was watching the translations of the English language, Tuppence Halfpenny was translated with "I hate that company." And it was just very, very interesting translation with the, I looked to see if there was like a British English to help the translation, but that didn't work. So sorry, Jerry, go on.
Jamie, great presentation, as are all of the British Empire Study Group sessions that I've watched over the last little while. I was interested to hear you mention that the West African Frontier Force post-war had a couple of hundred Polish officers.
That wasn't post-war, that was during the war.
During the war. I'm sorry, I misinterpreted that. I wasn't aware of that. Were these officers people who had been serving in alongside the British Eighth Army in various parts of Africa?
No, they came down from, they had been Polish officers in Poland, ended up in the UK, and Churchill was informed that the West African Frontier Force was short of officers, so he asked that 200 would be sent there.
Okay.
And incidentally, there were 200 female Polish ladies who joined the Royal Air Force in Nairobi.
Okay.
The Polish people, they were. I do that as a separate subject.
Yeah, and you were also mentioning, or somebody was mentioning that it'd be good to get stamp collecting and philately into schools. And here in Brampton, Canada, the local stamp club that I belong to, myself and another couple of guys have been promoting stamps and stamp collecting in a couple of local grade schools. We haven't done anything for about 3 years because of the pandemic, but prior to that, we probably indoctrinated or inducted, whatever you want to call it, grade 7 and grade 8 kids into stamp collecting. Probably done 500-600. Unfortunately, none of them that I know of has joined the stamp club. But anyway, it's a start. We we try to teach them about stamps. Anyway, that's enough for me.
Going on to that, at the stamp fairs in Liverpool on a Saturday morning, they bring the kids in from the local schools, and the dealers hand philatelic material out to them, and it is very popular with the kids. So these are all ideas for getting people into the hobby. You know, if we all bring one person in, everybody brings one person in, the hobby moves on. If we bring two in, it doubles.
That's true.
Mind you, so does the price when you buy your stamps.
I have to admit that I have two children. When I say children, they're 48 and 50 years old, so they're not youngsters, and I have never been able to interest either one of them to collect stamps, other than for maybe a 3-week period many years ago. So anyway, that's another story.
Should have put your foot down when they were young.
So everyone, do you know Adél? Adél, you weren't here, so they have. I explained about the power outage, but Adél, you know, we were going to introduce Adél, and
Yes.
anyone who doesn't know Adél, Robert, I think you did a great introduction.
Thank you. So I'm Jamie's right-hand man, if you can call it that. And we met 3 years ago when he attended one of our Zooms. And Jamie is a bit on in age, and he struggled with the buttons and understanding how it works. So I offered to help him. And since then, we've been Zooming each other every day. And I soon realized that Jamie's not afraid of the computer. And most people over 60 are quite afraid of the computer, and they don't like it, and they don't want to learn new things. And I then kindly coerced him with brute force to scan in his collection, you know, take out each cover from his write-ups, scan it in, put it into PowerPoint. And I had many fights with him. But at the end of the day, I got what I wanted and he got what he wanted. But the most important thing for me to get onto these presentations was information that is unwritten. Because with every cover, with every story that you want to tell, even when you exhibit, you've got a limited space to put your words. And when you do a presentation, you don't just want to, like a parrot reads the words that's on the slide. There needs to be extra information. And then I had the brainwave to tell him, or to force him again, to do the voice recordings as well. And what I wanted on the voice recording was the unwritten information, because, you know, in 10, 20, 15 years' time, as history is being rewritten, that information will be lost. So that is a big drive of ours. And I've given Jamie another 85 years to finish digitizing his whole collection. So let's see how it goes. That was all I wanted to share with you guys. Thank you.
Can I just say I'm in a wonderful position that Adél lives in Pretoria, South Africa. I'm in Stockport, England. And if she nags me too much, I can just press the button.
Now that is wonderful. I think that's what philately is all about, and Adél, I think that's great. That, you know, if you push these guys hard enough, they'll eventually do it. I know. Okay, but Jamie, wonderful presentation.
Yes. Thanks, Lou. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Jamie. Very good.
You're welcome, Mum.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, there is. Yes, hello?
Yeah, Tony.
Yes, Tony, carry on.
Look, I think I agree with you completely about the fact that all of us collectors, we went through the period of our younger years where the best present that we could have got, our best birthday present, well, I know that I could have ever been given, was an encyclopedia, or was a book like that, because I would enjoy greatly reading it. But nowadays, of course, everyone is you know, they've got the Google, or they've got the Wikipedias, and they can, or they've got, for whatever other reasons they might want it for, various social groupings. But in some ways, you know, that's taken over from our love of stamps and finding out about geography and all of that. I've been trying in one of our local stamp clubs here. I've been trying to get, like, when they have their stamp clubs, everyone, if they've got anything of interest, they come up and they show it. And, you know, I think this happens with most stamp clubs around the world. But I've been trying to encourage these people there are so few actual stamp magazines about now, to try and, if they've got something which is, you know, special, then they should perhaps write a half page or write a page on it and try and get it published in the stamp magazines, just to be able to show things that other people can't see. I mean, there's all of the clubs which have, you know, a specialist of some particular aspects of stamp collecting, and they'll come in and they'll show their new cover that they've received and something special about it. It would be good if we could try and get them to write a short article that would make a page or two for some of the printed stamp magazines, because it all gives a bit of extra interest, and people can see, and they might even develop an interest in collecting in that particular area. It's just one scope of doing something like, and I know that I'm trying to get this year a small group of, whilst I do the personalised stamps, I'm trying to get a small group of those to produce some Christmas ones, in which they do it as a swap amongst themselves. And it's one way of getting people involved, particularly juniors, if they're doing their own stamp and they're trying to develop an interest like that. So it's just another way of people to try and get people doing it, and because there's just not enough juniors. You know?
Yeah, I was thinking the essay contests, and you know how they have the scholarships where you win a prize. I think that usually attracts people. Money will attract kids to write and get into the area. And I don't mean, it's more token, like scholarship money, help them go to college. But that takes an infrastructure much larger than ours, which is, we're free membership. Why are we free membership? Because I don't want a kid doesn't have, a college person doesn't have $25, $50 to spend on a stamp club. So
I agree about the previous talk. I'm sorry. I agree with the previous person was talking about writing short articles and sharing knowledge. I happen to be here in Brampton, or in Canada, in the Toronto area. I happen to be the president of the Greater Toronto Area Philatelic Alliance, and we have a journal or a magazine that we publish 4 times a year. It's digital now, and we encourage our members to write short articles, nothing large, because if it's too detailed or too long, people won't read it. These are just general knowledge type things that people can pick something up on and learn a little bit about markings on a cover or something like that. I did a whole bunch of articles over the last 20 odd years entitled Unusual Postage Stamps, where I would find something that was different and write a little blurb about it, whether the stamp was something that was printed or issued in Denmark, printed on fish skin, or these scratch and sniff things, or scratch and feel things, whatever, just to let people know what's going on. And on top of that, I would write other articles about some of my collecting interests that other people might not be interested in, but at least if they saw that type of thing, they would know more about it. Anyway, enough from me.
Sounds like some good TikTok topics.
Well, yeah.
TikTok is like, anyway, it's It's newer it's for the younger crowd, and very short, very catchy. But like writing a letter on fish would be something.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think if I can just make a comment as well in terms of getting new members, younger members. The nature of philately is very serious business, and there's a lot of research involved in it, and the people that have got the letters behind their name, that got their accreditation, they spend 20, 30, 40 years to get there. And it is quite an intense study when you do that. And when you've got younger members or new members, because my mommy passed and I've got the collection, so I come to a club and I come and bring my stuff, but it's often that this is not nice stuff, this is not good stuff. But at the end of the day, it's stamps. And where I actually came to the club and I brought my mommy's box of stamps, I'm now being pushed away by the demeanor of the members. And you can understand where they come from, but they tend to look at everything as if it is an exhibit ready to be judged. And not everything is ready to be judged. Sometimes you've just got something because it's nice. And I think we must also try and change our behavior a little bit and have fun with it, because it is a hobby after all. And that is what I try and encourage with our Zoom meetings. You know, if we do the letter B or the letter A, I don't do Bali or Bermuda as everybody else does. I put beards on stamps. Why? Because it doesn't have to be serious, you know. So I go through all the countries, short beards, long beards, whatever, because it is a hobby. And, you know, we must encourage that, because how else are you going to get the youngsters here? They're not going to spend hours and hours on research. They want to put it on their phone. They want to put the picture up and they want to get 20 likes. That is what they want. So you've got to give them instant gratification, or else you're not going to keep them. You're going to lose them. So, yeah, that was what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, so I have a short beard, but I see that Duncan Barber down below us has a long beard. And Bob Vogel, he's kind of medium.
I should say to Adél that you know that there has been a book published on beards on stamps. Oh, hang on. Well, I've lost sound there.
Oh, I was muted. Sorry, I didn't know about that. That was just a coincidence that happened at one of my meetings for fun. So I'll look into it. Thank you.
It was published in Australia, and it might have just been somebody's collection, I think, but it is there. There is, at least I do know somebody that has a copy of it anyway.
Oh, thank you.
And I say as well, I think that one of the things that is perhaps a mistake is that, especially when kids are collecting and so on, that we fail to take a long-term view of these things. I'm involved in sort of supporting a couple of school stamp programs and so on. And some people look at that and say, oh, it's a waste of time. I mean, these kids are only interested in topicals. They, you know, they're not serious collectors. They become teenagers and God knows what happens at that point. What we have to focus on people who are going to, I don't know, collect penny blacks or whatever. Anyway, the bottom line is that these kids have an amazing amount of fun for the year or 2 or 5 years that they collect stamps. They associate stamp collecting with some interesting, cool things that they do. So what if they give up their collections when they go off to high school? Maybe they will pick it up 40 years later. Maybe they will pass it on to their kids. Who knows? If kids have fun with otherwise orphan, unloved stamps, it's all good.
You're right.
The basis of any collecting is that it is a leisure pursuit. There are no rights, there are no wrongs. People should collect whatever they like, whenever they like. And in my younger days, I actually knew every single capital city of the world, all of them, without exception. Unfortunately, today, I've lost that. Simply because we've had geographical changes, particularly in the continent of Africa, and what was Nyasaland is no longer. I don't know the capitals anymore. I've lost it. However, what I have found is that as I become older, perhaps more insane, philately has not only given me a reasonable living, but it's also concentrated my mind, broadened my whole geographical aspect, and historic knowledge. And that is a reward in itself. And I'm sure that if I didn't have an interest in philately at any level, what would I do with my time? I'd probably be like a lot of people that I see in the place where I live, that sleep in until noon, then go to a bar, speak to the same people, the same conversation, get drunk, and go to bed. Do the same the next day. I don't do that. I've got a interest in philately, and even though it does sometimes take a back step, it wasn't appropriate for me to collect during my military service, so it was all put to one side. However, it resurrected itself, and the whole hobby, as well as other hobbies, will continue to survive in some form or level. They won't die. And the only benefits to anybody are that it will concentrate your mind, it will broaden your geographical and historic knowledge, and at the same time be very, very enjoyable and relaxing. And we'll all live longer.
Yeah, good here, Mike.
I can't help but make one comment that's not philatelic at all. I'm looking at the screen and I see this image of a fellow called Michael Dixon, and every time I look at him, I think he looks like a younger Winston Churchill.
Good God, man! How dare you?
I was thinking the same thing.
Okay, so it's not just me.
I didn't want to bring that up. Listen, I have a question for everybody. There's a elementary school which is grades like 1 through 6, literally 2 blocks down the road from where I live. And I was wondering if I should offer to bring in, stamps that I have when a special event is going on. Like the U.S. just announced the space cruise for going around the moon next year, supposedly. There's a Canadian involved, by the way, also. And I was wondering if anybody has had experience with, younger kids in schools and introducing stamps on a thematic basis or otherwise.
I can comment on that, Jamie. It's I'm not sure who was talking. When we have run the programs in the past to the schools, we provide the kids, and I call them kids because these are, grade 5 to grade 6, 7-year-old kids. We provide them with as many stamps as we can. We try to get colorful ones, and they do various things with them. They try to identify where the stamp is from, and they attach it to a big drawn on the wall map, and they do various exercises with them. The teachers will assign them a program where they have to pick out a number of stamps, and not based on a particular topic, but identify where the stamp is from, identify the color, the denomination, and what's on the stamp. And it gets interesting when this is used in a French-speaking school too. And we've done many other programs with the kids. And every year so far, the kids have actually done their own stamp designs. The teachers will give them a mat that they can draw and design the stamps in. And one of the local stamp people in the Toronto area that used to work at the Vinnie Green Foundation actually took a bunch of these designs down to the big show in New York a number of years ago, and they were very well received. So there's all kinds of things we can do with the stamps. I'm not sure we have all the answers. One of the problems, though, that we've run into, and we've managed to get around it because we, know a couple of people in the right places. Sometimes it's difficult to get into the schools because of protocols that are in place for security, whether it be not gun security, but not getting too involved and too close to the kids. So, if you understand what I mean by that.
Yeah.
So
that's how it is in the United States.
We've been doing this for several years now. And like I said, we started many years ago. We're actually getting back into it this year. But the teachers, the two teachers that we're involved with, they trust us. And even though a couple other people wanted to get involved in the program, they said, no, we want you guys. So maybe we're just good guys. I don't know. I've talked enough today.
Earlier, someone suggested writing articles about, stamps, covers, whatever like that. I belong to a group called the Stamp Forum. It's an online philatelic group. Chris Dorn belongs to it, and a couple other people that are on site right now. And it's a 24-hour-a-day digital open forum where you can come in with whatever you want. We have people that are interested in Cinderellas, postal history, specific countries, specific, right down, looking at penny blacks and that type of thing. But the beauty of what we see on the forum is the information that's presented there oftentimes is very deep. People will take a cover and they'll dissect it and show what all the marks are for and where it came from and who the person might have even been in life. And all this goes in, this starts off as a post, and then this goes into a thread, the thread being a topic, like could cover Great Britain penny reds, or it could be airmails from the United States, whatever. We have just so many threads that one can choose from, to insert information. And in terms of writing articles, we have a newsletter that comes out 4 times a year. It's really wonderful. I mean, the articles are very in-depth, very informative. And I just think that this is an alternative to the print magazines because it is online, it's instantly accessible, and you can come in and out whenever you want to and contribute whatever it is that you have an interest in. I find it very useful, and I've been in for a couple of years now, and it's the best.
I have seen that. I think it's called Stamp Forum. It's the various threads there. You know, I look at it every once in a while. When we solicit or write articles for our publication, which is digital now, we got away from the print version because it was costing far too much money. You know, we just couldn't afford it, and digital is probably the way to go now. But we try to prepare basic things. We don't do any fly spec articles like that or anything overly deep. Those things belong in specialist magazines, probably. We just do what I think is general interest. Whether it's my interest or somebody else's, that's a matter of discussion.
Right. Well, we cover everything from fly specking to having a really good time. I mean, this week we had quite a discussion on Lower Slobovia, which is a country that doesn't exist. Al Capp invented it for the Little Abner series way back in the 30s or whatever. But anyway, everybody had a good time with it, and then ended up stringing out into a lot of other areas of philately that it was just fun. So we do that too.
Yeah. I see a fellow called Duncan Barber online here. He was a former member of our club here in Brampton, and you talked about the stamps of Upper Slobovia. I remember seeing a presentation or an exhibit of Duncan's, and I forget the title of it, but it was almost exhibiting things the wrong way, I think, or something like that.
It was called Tempramani, and it took all the advice that I'd been given from judges, and possibly some of the advice I'd given, and twisted it all around.
Yeah. So it was a very, very interesting, fun exhibit to see.
I took it to a local show and asked whether I should take it to a national show, and they said, well, I don't think it would do very well at a national show. What have you done with it before? I said, well, the last time I showed it was at a national show, and one of the judges wasn't supposed to have told me that it had one vote for a certificate, one for a bronze, one for a silver bronze, one for a silver, one for a vermeil, and one for a gold. And Charles Verd suggested a jury to put together. Most of them are now retired or deceased. And then Anne Triggle told me a jury that she'd put together to make sure I got a certificate. I think Michael Dixon was on one of those juries, but to defend the innocent, I won't remember which one.
I just don't recall. You know, it's usually about this time that Joan says to me, Michael, you've been very quiet. Well, I've got a couple of observations. The first one is a bit of a philosophical one. It seems to me that many of our BESG web sessions like this wind up talking about how we're going to expand the youth interest in our hobby. And it strikes me that there ought to be some sort of coordinating authority that can set some guidelines as to how each and every one of us could go about this. Now, I believe the APS has an education director or troop leader or something. Maybe we ought to have, Joan, a meeting where one of those people who've done a lot of this, even people not necessarily at the APS board or anything else, so sort of chair a round table so that we can all air some of our thoughts and ideas about how to promote the hobby amongst youth. Secondly, I'd like to thank Jamie Smith for a most fascinating and interesting talk. In the days of my youth, I spent a year living in Kumasi, Ghana. It changed its name from Gold Coast by then. And one of the things he said in his opening statement that sort of jabbed me a bit was, he said the British interest in what was the Gold Coast was largely due to the slave trade. Well, I put it to you, sir, that it was just as much for the gold trade. That's why it was called the Gold Coast. the gold mines at Obuasi, which is not too far from the Ashanti capital, Kumasi, were very well known back in very early times and were a great attraction. They still export gold from there. I remember sitting on an aircraft flying from Kumasi to Accra, where we each had a gold bar underneath our seats so that the aircraft could spread the load. Anyway, fascinating and very, very interesting. I always remember my days out in Ghana as a visiting professor. And thank you, sir. Do well, do more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. God bless.
Oh, thank you. Jamie, it's late where you are, isn't it?
3 minutes to 1.
Okay.
It's early.
See, my husband picks on me for not being direct, right? Yeah, but no, it's now I'm going to have to pick on someone else who's been quiet.
The other thing about stamp shows, which Joey was too modest to say, was that the Bramley Stamp Club had a judge show about every alternate year or 2 out of 5 years, and the other year it was entirely non-competitive. And after 10 years of doing that, we had more than enough exhibitors in the competitive years. The show I'm judging the end of April has about a third of it is non-competitive, or at least if it's judged, it's not judged by the jury and the likes of me.
And where's that? Where's that?
That one's actually Peterborough, Ontario.
Oh, okay, okay.
Bramley did it. I got the judges every 2 to 5 years, and I think they've had judge shows after I left.
We I have to correct you, Duncan, on that. It's probably been since you left. We started getting less and less judge shows. We would have people come in, or qualified people come in and comment on them, because we were trying to introduce new collector or new people to put exhibits together. So we would get people like Garfield Porch or Frank Lucio, who were experienced judges, to make comments and provide guidance to how they could continue and carry on. But as far as having formalized judging, no. Sorry to have to correct you, Duncan.
Okay. But there have been a large number of Bramley exhibitors at national shows.
Oh, correct, yes.
Many of whom weren't national exhibitors.
I have, well, I'm not sure whether I've actually exhibited at a national level, but at the national show, maybe as an invited person. But yes, we've had other people like Ingo Nassau, Bob Thorne, and whatnot, and late Bill Percy, and of course, Duncan Barber. When you were still a member here, before you trekked off to the Great White North.
Yeah, the temperature was 30 degrees C this afternoon, according to the thermometer in the car, but there's still ice on the lake. So that's a demonstration of non-equilibrium thermodynamics.
Yeah, I would stay off the ice though.
If you'd like to get back to a little bit of the how to involve schools, there is another possibility, and that is that particularly I'm now talking about small schools, like in some of the country areas where there'll be a small school where there might only be 10 people in a class or something like that. But if you can get into a small school where they actually, it's not so much stamps that they start with, but they start a postcard item where everybody in the class, this I'm now talking about primary school people, where everybody in the class has to write a postcard to a relative, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, or whatever. And of course, they have to learn all you know, the right ways of setting it out and all this sort of thing. But that can then develop into what sort of a stamp you're going to put on it. And it can be personalized quite well, and everybody has to actually send. Now there was actually some usage of post offices when post offices were actually helping by donating some stamps and things like that. I know that's getting a bit rare these days, but it is one way of getting into the small schools, because they're manageable if it's a small class. But if it's a large class, well, then there are problems, because you just can't, you don't have the access. But it is another way, if anyone is interested in getting into the local school, this is one way of doing it.
I agree with you, Tony, because the last year that we did it, which is 2019, I guess, one of the teachers took part of his class, and he said, we decided the kids should not only learn about stamps, but how to use stamps. So they had to write a letter to either themselves or some, you know, their aunt or their grandmother or something like that. But it meant that they had to know what to put on an envelope. For example, or they would say, if you're writing to yourself even, like, what's your address? Well, I'm not sure. What's your postal code or zip code? What's that? What information do you put in an envelope? Where do you put it? And where do you put the stamp? And we provided discount stamps, and a couple of times the kids would be putting the stamps on, and it said it won't stick. Well, I'm not surprised. You've licked all the gum off, because they had really licked it, and then they had to go and mail the actual items. So the teachers took them to the local mailbox, and the kids could put the stamps in the envelopes in there. And, oh, this is what this thing is. We thought this was something you tipped over on Halloween night. It's for fun. So, but yeah, you're right, Tony. That's it wasn't done with a huge group. It was probably maybe a dozen kids.
Sounds like we're going to need a handwriting class too.
Well,
it was a continuing process. Like it happened for several years in a row. I don't know what's happened to it now, but you know, they came back, they revisited, and then they learned it all again, or they knew it better, and then they did it again, and they knew it better then, and then of course they moved out of primary school. But it followed through. It was a good little approach. It was a good method of being able to bring discussion in, and it's one way of getting interest. Like, look, for example, I went to a stamp club meeting not last night, the night before, and it was quite interesting. I hadn't been to this particular club before, but there was particular people were showing items which were of interest to me, and they were quite surprised that there were several visitors who had quite a lot. It was to do with New Zealand stuff, but there were quite a lot of visitors that had good New Zealand collections and were interested in it, and they were quite pleased to have the extra visitors who knew what they were seeing. But in the process of going to that, I actually saw a stamp that I'd only ever seen on auction catalogues, or I'd only ever seen as images. I'd never actually seen one of these stamps before. And there it was, you know, someone had bought it. It was being shown that night. And after all these years, it was the very first one I'd ever seen in person. This is the 1906 Christchurch penny claret, which some of you would know about, but not a cheap stamp by any means, but it was the first one I'd ever seen, and in person. It was quite wonderful to go to the stamp clubs and that, to see some of these things.
I liked what Jamie did with his video library. I think that's top, really help get some people interested in all the topics that Adél, you guys put together. A phenomenal library, and you break it down into manageable topics. You don't go from A to Z in great depth. It's really nice the way you guys have organized that and presented that. Jamie, are you still awake?
I'm still awake. It's Adél I'm thinking of. It's 2 o'clock in the morning there.
Oh my gosh, we should let her go to bed. Oh.
Guys, thank you very much. I had a great time here, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you. Thank you very much, Adél.
Good night.
Okay, so we'll say good night, Jamie. You'll go to bed?
Yeah, another one.
I'm going to go to bed too. I did not get a nap this afternoon, so I'm tired.
I'd just like to thank everybody for staying and just nattering. Most enjoyable. Thanks.
Thank you, Jamie and Adél.
Thank you very much. Thank
Okay.
you.
Good night, folks.
Good night, everybody. God bless.
Good night.
No.
Scott's there not saying anything.
Hey?
Scott's not saying anything. He's just smiling. I like your reactions, though.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I like when you light up. So, okay. Is there anything else? Thank you again for joining us. And we have some. The next program should be really interesting because Fernando, if you think it's late there, I think he's in Switzerland, and he's agreed to do it at 6 o'clock our time and stay up as long as it takes. So that's the power of youth.
Yeah. So
he's a young guy. He could do that. But so that's really nice. And then when we have Michelle's the editors coming to talk to us to sort of balance some of the Stanley Gibbons, because I'm not as familiar with the German catalog as I am with the English catalog. So that should be interesting. We have to adjust the time there because they're very strict about that. But all good stuff. And then Alex's presentation should be really nice.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Joan. Thanks for everybody. That was great.
Well, thanks for all the good ideas. And I'm going to take him up on. Oh, Colin, speak up. I'm going to take him up on contacting the APS editor and the education person and see if we could just develop an action plan and not just talk about it. But Rob and I have something planned that we're going to do that to sort of help bring some of these stories out. We're still writing that up in the guidance, but I think that will be fun too.
Right. Rob, can you organize a link to that group you were talking about, please?
Oh yeah.
That would
definitely.
be good.
I'll put it on here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, if you have any question, just shoot us a line and we'll forward it to Rob. Rob will get it. So that's it. Good morning, Mike.
Thanks, everyone.